We're a couple minutes after the hour, so I think I'll go ahead and get us started. I want to welcome you all today. I want to welcome our speakers, Catherine, Amy, and Olivia. Um, I just have one request, and that's that while the speakers are talking, I just ask you to keep yourselves muted. Um, and then at the end of the program, we'll have time for Q&A. So if you have questions as they're talking, just go ahead and put them into the chat and we'll get to those at the end. Or if it's a really pertinent question at the time that someone's presenting, we'll try to address that at the time. But please use the chat feature. And let's get started. So I'm going to give a brief introduction. I'm Kelsey Wiskirchen. I'm WARP's Executive Director, and this is our monthly panel discussion program with the theme Continuing Textile Traditions. And so this is actually our last panel discussion of the year because we're taking a break in December. And today we are going to be learning about the Weaving and Fiber program at Haywood Community College, which was started in 1977 in the Appalachian region of North Carolina. The school honors the local tradition of craft in the region and was designed to help craftspeople learn skills and to continue those traditions now into our 21st century. So we're joined by longtime WARP member Catharine Ellis, who is one of the founders of Haywood Community College's Fiber Arts program and was an instructor from 1977 to 2008. Then we will hear from Amy Putansu, who is currently the head of the program. And then third, we'll hear from Olivia Goldstein, who is a recent graduate. So I want to thank you all for being here. I want to thank our presenters for sharing your time with us today. And I'm going to turn it over first to Catherine.
Okay, thank you, Kelsey. I appreciate it. So let me jump right in here. Okay. Okay, wait a minute. There. All right. Let me there. We titled this program here Dreaming About Weaving and Then Really Doing It, because let's face it, we all dream about things, and a lot of times we don't ever get around to doing it. So I kind of look at that as the story of Haywood Community College and my own experience with the college and what it helped me to do. All right. Just so you have a sense of where it is we are, we're at the southern end of the Appalachian Mountains. Yes, we're in the mountains. And this is the kind of terrain that we're surrounded by. And I think it's important to understand that craft itself, including weaving, probably lasted in a traditional sense for a longer time in Western North Carolina simply because of its isolation. People were isolated. People did what they had to do. They wove, they spun, they did all of that. This is a photo from an exhibition I put up last year at a local museum. And the inspiration for this small exhibition was the data from the 1810 Haywood County census, where there were 382 families, 286 looms, 632 spinning wheels, and 153 flax breaks. So that gives you a sense of the isolation of the area. In the early part of the 20th century, missionaries came in here, essentially. Francis Goodrich, part of the Presbyterian church, and they started coming in and actually helping the local women to make some money for themselves. You know, you can turn this weaving, you can turn these crafts, these things that you've done forever into some money by selling it to people mostly from away from here. So that was the beginning of the Southern Highland Craft Guild. Miss Lucy Morgan started Penland School in the 1920s. It's the same thing. It's the same story. And Phyllis Alvick, longtime Warp member, documented all of this so beautifully in her Weavers of the Southern Highlands, talking about the Hambidge Center, Aramont, Penland, Berea, all of these schools that are part of this story. Now, Haywood Community College began, as Kelsey said, in 1977. And once again, it was people that made this happen. We didn't have a Miss Lucy, we didn't have a Frances Goodrich, but we had Mary Cornwell, who was a home extension agent in Haywood County, was helping people do crafts all over the county. We had James Roy Moody, who was a businessman and a great proponent of the arts. And we had Darlene Hodges and her husband, and she was a fiddle player and a guitar player. And they were part of the traditional music tradition. And they thought, hey, they were all connected to Haywood Community College. They were either, deans or on the board, and they had a vision. And these old folks had a dream. We could do something with craft at Haywood Community College. It was really pretty exciting. So about that time that was happening, I was making my own weaving for a lifetime dream come true. I was a student at Penland School of Crafts in the mid 70s. That's where Lenore Tawney had been in the 50s. I met Ruth Gaines there in the 1970s when I was there. She was a resident artist. She invited me into her studio. We became very, very good friends. And she was offered the job teaching at Haywood when it first opened in January of 77. So we both moved 2 hours away down to Waynesville, North Carolina. And I was amazed by the students themselves. It was a very non-traditional group of students. Many of them already had degrees. Many of them were coming back to either do pottery or fiber and weaving or jewelry or fine woodworking. And many of these people were doing something that they had always, always wanted to do. And they were taking time out from their lives. Most community college students are, in the 19 age 19 and 20, and ours weren't. We had a full range of ages, and they began studying craft as design, craft as making, the history of craft, and also the business and marketing of it. um, to be honest, we really, really struggled with the whole business and marketing of it. Although all of us as faculty, Ruth stayed for a short amount of time, and then I continued the program. Um, but all 4 or 5 of us that taught there, we had all been professional craftspeople. We all made work, we all sold work. It was the craft fairs of the 70s, that kind of thing. But in order to teach that, we struggled. We really, really, really struggled until we finally hooked up with an organization called North Carolina Real Enterprises, which stood for Action Learning, and they helped us. We worked for a couple of years with these folks to develop a series of classes. We took our students up to Baltimore to the craft market up there. They were able to show and sell their work. We were a part of the community. We're very, very much a part of the community. The North Carolina Arboretum would invite us in to pick dye plants. They had a new dye garden. We worked with the UNC Center for Craft. They brought my students in to help pack up shows. We were on the cover of the phone book in 1981. So everybody had us in their homes at that time. And we became educational members of the Southern Highland Craft Guild. This was a huge deal. It was huge to be, because our students could regularly, a couple of times a year, go to these professional craft fairs, sell their work. And it was also a location for our graduate shows, which we held in local bank buildings for the first few years before we had that. And I'm, my last slide is this one, and this is an organization that was started here in '93, Handmade in America, founded with the belief that economic revitalization was not necessarily tied to luring industry to the region, but in making known the heritage and craftsmanship that are so vitally a part of Western North Carolina. And I think that Haywood has it's just continued that mission for all of these years. And I'm pretty proud to have been part of it. And I'm pretty proud, yeah, to pass this on to Amy. So thank you. And I'm going to stop my sharing. Okay.
Thank you,
There.
Catherine. Thank you
Okay.
for the great background and history of the school program.
Good.
Okay,
Good.
so I'm going to turn it right over to Amy Putansu. Amy began teaching at Haywood in 2008. She is a graduate of RISD in textile design and was a studio artist in Maine before coming to North Carolina. And during her tenure at Haywood, Amy so far has graduated over 65 professional crafts fibers students. And also her contemporary textile art from her own practice is represented by Blue Spiral Gallery in Asheville and at the Penland Gallery at Penland School of Crafts in North Carolina. So Amy, we're so happy to have you here to talk about what's going on in the program currently.
Thank you, Kelsey. It is really nice to be here. Thanks for this opportunity. Um, I'm going to talk real briefly about, in more detail, the actual course layout as it stands in the fiber program today. Touch upon the impact that being here has made on me personally and my weaving practice. A little bit about the typical student body, and it's not any different than it was when Catherine was here, the non-traditional student. My teaching approach, and then lastly, how we are grappling with post-Helene in the fiber studio. So the image from the right, 1977, the first year of the program, and again in the studio. Very little has changed. We have moved into a brand new facility, which is pictured on the right. And it's lovely. It was designed exactly for us, just for us. The faculty was was involved with the architects in the design. So it's a lovely, beautiful facility. Um, and other than that, very little has changed. Um, okay, the course layout. So, of course, we begin with an intro to weaving class. Here's my current class of intro students, and we're analyzing a color and weave project. It's the second project of the first semester. I can have up to 13 total students in the program, and that's between first year and second year. This is an associate's degree program. And our studio hours are intensive. For example, Intro to Weaving meets for 17 hours a week. So all of the studio courses are like that. There are also support courses that teach design fundamentals such as 2D design, 3D design, color theory. In the second semester, the fiber students move straight into intermediate weaving. Lace weave is one of the specific structures that's taught in this class. Another technique that is taught is Theo-Mormon. And that's the closest we get to tapestry in the program these days. And what all of this has meant for me over this is my 16th year teaching, is I did not know all of these structures in detail before I came here. I was pretty good weaver, but I have had to learn so much. And summer and winter and more about double weave and so on and so forth, just in order to teach these things. So it's broadened my experience hugely. Well, there's a dye class in the program in the second semester. And of course, these days there's a serious interest in natural dyes. Um, the book by Catharine Ellis and Joy Boutrup is the textbook that we use in this class. And here's an example of a student's towels made in a summer and winter technique and using all natural dyes. As Catherine said, the student body is a very broad range of experience levels, of ages, of personal backgrounds, And it's always been that way. And that's one of my favorite things about being here. Every cohort is so diverse. And here we are, we're tied together through this common thread of weaving and fiber. So then the second year, the tone shifts and becomes more about production practices, professionalism, and the business courses. Students in their second year actually write a business plan. They also make products or art pieces, and this is when they have the opportunity to sell at the craft shows and exhibitions that Catherine mentioned. We're still an active member of the Southern Highlands Craft Guild. In all of that regard, very little has changed in these since 1977, many, many years. The very final semester, the studio course is called Professional Textiles, and this was a minor change that I made shortly after I took the position. It used to be called Professional Weaving, but I've opened up our production class and our professional class to be a little bit more inclusive of a broader range of textile techniques. Because to me, it makes sense that um, students have enough under their belt that's going to be reasonable in terms of earning a living. So what ends up happening is a lot of multi-process, really complex, interesting, and original textile pieces being produced in the studio. You know, I really see my role, especially in the second year, by the time everyone is quite fairly independent, is as a facilitator. And my students, as I mentioned, are making very ambitious pieces in this final semester. Sometimes art pieces, sometimes functional pieces. And students graduate with either a diploma or an Associates of Applied Science degree. Now, what graduates do after they leave us is a wide variety of things. Some folks go off and work in galleries. Many work for other craftspeople in the field, established craftspeople, at least for a short time. Many students go into teaching themselves, which delights me very much. And then others transfer to BFA or MFA programs at four-year schools and continue their education. So the days following the storm, was obviously the college closed, and we closed for 2.5 weeks. And during that time, and I probably make Western North Carolina feel this way, it was this time I had this, personally had this compulsion of how to help, how to be of use or of service in this time. And another challenge I was faced with was having to change the syllabus for my courses because losing 2.5 weeks of the semester meant I could not carry out my planned projects. So Jagger's Fun Wool Mill in Maine closing, some of you may be aware, and they produce beautiful wool. I contacted them and asked if they would be willing to donate wool yarns and that we would turn our fiber studio at Haywood into a tiny production center and actually weave blankets for people in need. It served the purpose because it introduced a brand new weave structure and continued to be a challenge for my students. I needed to make sure they were still meeting course objectives, of course. But also, it's also serving this this compulsion to help and to be a part of the solution. So Jagger Spun Wool donated 129 pounds of superwash wool, and this project where students could choose between one of 3 different sized blankets: a studio size, a youth size, or a twin, based on their ambition and their skill. And the weave structure, which was new to everyone, including me, is called overshot patterned double weave. Students chose their own traditional overshot pattern to then convert into a double weave structure that is very, very practical and applicable to the blanket as a product. So they're very lofty and soft and warm. And these patterns actually have a really strong history in Appalachia. So that feels really suitable too. So what our original plan was to actually give these blankets to people in need. How we were going to identify those people, I did not know. But since then, the blankets are so beautiful that we're feeling like to actually auction them. And then we think we could generate more money to give to those in needs and local organizations post-Helene. So that is what we're up to at the Haywood Fiber Studio right now. It's really exciting on so many levels. And it's really feeding, it's very nourishing, I think, for the students on our end too. So anyway, thank you very much. And here is how to reach me if you have any more questions in the future. Uh-oh.
Thank you, Amy. That was fantastic. We didn't see your final slide for long with your contact information, but if you put that in the chat while Olivia is presenting, that would be great. And
Yeah.
we will also make sure that goes out by email in the follow-up. So thank
Something
you.
happened on my end, but I'm glad you saw the important stuff.
I think we saw all of it. That last slide was just a brief flash. So
Thank you.
the way that you are pivoting the semester and seeing out the semester with your students, still learning new skills and meeting objectives while serving the community is really inspiring. And I also want to say that when the selling of the blankets is sorted out, we'll make sure everyone who registered for this program too, that they get that announcement, so we have everyone's contact information and can help spread the word about that. Okay, fantastic. I'm going to turn it over next to Olivia Goldstein. Olivia is originally from New Jersey and has lived in Asheville, North Carolina for nearly a decade. She graduated from Haywood Community College in 2018 with a degree in professional craft weaving, and she is now pursuing a degree in mass communication with a focus on videography in order to obtain the necessary skills to follow her passion of documenting textiles, specifically weaving around the world. And we have the exciting opportunity to preview a few of Olivia's documentary clips and hear about some of the travels she's been doing. So Olivia, I'm going to turn it over to you. Thank you for being here with us.
Thank you, Kelsey. All right. First of all, hi, everybody. I'm Olivia. A special shout out to my mom who's here right now, which is very exciting. So I'm glad that I wrote in that intro when I had sent it previously that I graduated in 2018, because it's hard for me to even remember because of how many times I've gone back to do independent studies over the course of the past, I guess, 6 years at this point. But yeah, so I graduated from Haywood Community College with a degree in professional craft with a focus on weaving. When I had started writing out or thinking about what I wanted to talk about with this presentation, I really started reflecting on the fact that Haywood, my time there, and the place itself and the community that I formed there are the most sacred of my life. It was the most special time of my life. It also is, after the storm, one of the first places that I thought of as far as all the destruction went, because it being such a sacred place. I was worried about what may have happened and was thrilled to hear that it had survived. So anyway, I don't want to embarrass her too much, but Amy Putansu, my shepherd, welcomed me into a world that really walked the line of art and craft and had an unbelievable way of teaching that encouraged individual curiosity and experimentation within the framework of projects that she gave us. Some of which that I have in my slides here, and I have a bunch of other slides that just have some work for visuals. During my time at Haywood, I became really obsessed with color and structure, and Amy spent individual time with each student, allowing us to really explore those specific interests and expand our creative paths through that. Early on in school, I became interested in the documentation of weaving, which was sparked through textile films that we watched during one of our textile history classes. They exposed us to history and contemporary craft in various regions of the world, and I became fascinated with the lineage of weaving. Being in a space weaving with other women, and realizing all of those that had been doing the same for thousands of years before us, sparked a deep desire to witness those communities in action and delve deeper into the aspects of the global textile economy and the importance of cultural preservation through weaving. In 2017, I was awarded the HGA Dendel Scholarship, and Amy reminded me a couple weeks ago that my entire essay actually had focused on my dream to document weaving. Fast forward to graduation, I felt lost. I had a hard time without the stability of the community, the space, and the time that was allotted during the time that I had been at school at Haywood. I found myself floundering a lot, flip-flopping on efforts to launch a business, isolated in my practice, and as a highly social person, it left me feeling kind of alone and sad and a desire to be around my fellow weavers who I had like built this community with. I guess in a sense, like I lost some of my purpose and I wasn't really sure how I could regain it or like where to look to. So eventually I decided that perhaps my own weaving business as a main source of income was not doable for me for various reasons. A big one also being that I am not a big fan of social media. And I saw that as like a very central point to being able to put myself out there as a weaver. But I knew the entire time that whatever I decided to do had to orbit weaving. In 2021, I enrolled at UNCA to get a bachelor's degree in communications with a minor in Spanish. And my specific desire was to learn the skills necessary to realize my little baby weaver dream and travel the world and document communities of weavers. In the summer of 2023, in conjunction with a grant from UNCA's undergraduate research, I went to Guatemala and filmed a documentary about a weaving collective called Trauma Textiles that was born out of strife from a civil war where indigenous weavers unified to create their own textile economy in hopes of freeing themselves of the exploitation within the textile industry while simultaneously preserving their culture and carving a path forward to teach their children how to continue on weaving. This photo over here was taken in Salcaja, which some of y'all might be familiar with. It's right out of a city called Shela, and it has an unbelievable raw material market economy. And this is where Trauma Textiles, the cooperative, had been going since their inception in the 80s to buy their materials. They allowed us to spend a few hours there filming all of the hustle and bustle and all of the commerce that was going on. This weaving specific store had everything from yarn to shuttles to reeds, which were very inexpensive, by the way. And that was also where I learned this really cool thing where I was buying a little shuttle and I asked about the perns that fit on them. And they explained to me that instead of using like factory made perns, they actually take pens and they take the ink out and they cut down the pens and that's what they use as perns. I thought that was pretty spectacular. This was a particularly fascinating experience, especially being from the States where I see the front end of the textile economy. You go into a store, you buy a garment, you buy a rug, you're seeing it from that perspective. And it's this was the first time I'd ever been to a market so expansive and so grand, that was just for materials, which reflected just like the vastness of the textile industry there. And it was also really busy, which was really cool. So I have a little clip from the documentary that I am in post-production of right now, and I'll play that for y'all.
De la asociación es de que ayudar a las mujeres artesanas, porque la mayor parte de mujeres no hablan español, hablan solo su idioma maya. Tenemos personas del quiché que hablan Ixil, zacatepeques que hablan cachiquel. En Sololá hay 3 idiomas mayas, que los que viven en la orilla del camino hablan quiché. Los que viven adentrito del camino, digamos, en los pueblitos, hablan cachiquel. Y los que viven alrededor del lago de Atitlán, hablan sotujil. Pues la misión de Tama es de que la gente siempre se reúna, ¿verdad? Y que valoren el apoyo que se les está dando, porque ustedes saben que uno cuando no habla español no puede uno trabajar en alguna casa con alguna persona, ¿verdad? De trabajar en oficios domésticos o ser niñera o algo, porque no hablan español. Entonces la misión de ellas es solo tejer, ganar dinero para que tengan un pequeño ingreso en su familia.
I also, my first stab at documenting textiles was in a 100 level class that I took at UNCA, where I actually went to Haywood and asked them if I could film the weavers there. And I have a little...
De la asociación es de que
That's not the right one. Is this the right one? Let's see.
That's our beautiful campus.
That is our yeah, and that's a drone shot of our gorgeous campus, my alma mater, in the fall time, which is just an unbelievable thing to see. And yeah, I think, oh, there we go again. Here is my contact information and my website. Yeah. And one last little tidbit that I will share is that on my website, you can see photos of this, but this rug, which I was so unbelievably thrilled with, and it's naturally dyed, it was in a little store that I had opened up with my mom 3 weeks before the storm that was unfortunately like in ground zero. It was right along the Swannanoa River, and it is actually the only building that's still standing over there, but there was a landslide and the ceiling collapsed and it filled all the way to the roof with water, and I went in and pulled it out and washed it off, and the colors are nearly as vibrant as ever, so that was pretty special too. Yeah. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Olivia. Thank you so much for sharing with us and for showing us your fantastic documentary clips. Great. Well, I'm going to ask anyone with a question, please put it in the chat. We also have plenty of time, so if anyone really wants to unmute and ask your own question, you're also free to do that. It looks like there is a question here for you, Olivia. What is the name of the city near Shayla that you did the short documentary? This is from Sonia, and she's going there in January.
Oh, awesome. So Shayla is where the documentary was actually based in, but we went to a bunch of places around. We went to Sololá, which is where we got to interview Indigenous weavers. And then the place that we went to in the photo that I just showed. That's called Salcaja. I can type it into the chat. Let's see if I can, there we go. Salcaja, and it is a pretty spectacular place. You can also buy pre-made jaspe warp on the street. And they'll have all these different patterns in them, and you can just go and like set it up on your loom to weave butterflies or different motifs that they have, and they're pretty spectacular.
Great. Thank you, Olivia. Other questions? Please feel free to unmute if you'd like to ask a question or even have a comment for our speakers.
So I would ask any of the two of you, or especially Amy, I guess, what's your prognosis for getting back to school in any kind of normal way?
We are back. So I'm sorry that wasn't clear. We were only closed for 2.5 weeks after the storm. So
right, but in terms of catching up to when you can, I guess, start a new class because the old ones got so changed.
Right. Yes. This fall semester got changed pretty dramatically. But I think we're still meeting what needed to be met in terms of learning objectives. And so there were 3 projects that needed to be either skipped or pushed into the spring semester. And so I haven't decided on that entirely, but I think at least one of those 3 projects is so important that I am going to push it into intermediate weaving for the spring semester. You know, we've been through this before on some level. COVID, it was, you know, a different circumstances and different types of pivoting necessary, but I've managed both times to make it work around any given kind of circumstance.
Cool. Clearly, flexibility is top of the list of prerequisites for the job.
Sure is. Yeah. Yes, resilience.
Yeah.
Amy's a visionary.
Must come with the territory, because Catherine was too, right?
Let's see, Dorothy, you have your hand up. It looks like if you'd like to unmute and ask a question, please go ahead.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm curious about the students and their goals or maybe their dreams and how they find the program.
Sorry, I was responding to someone in the chat. Can you repeat your question?
Okay, this is probably a good question for you. Just curious about what the students, you said there are a range. What are their goals, or what brings them to the program, and how do they find the program?
I think what brings them to the program is the theme of this talk, or the title of this talk that Catherine chose, which is, you know, dreaming of weaving, dreaming of being involved in textiles in a very serious and intensive way. Everyone shares that. Now, what they do afterwards is very broad. You know, some continue on at a hobbyist type of level forever, and that's all they ever wanted. They just wanted to get more immersed in learning and carry their personal studio practice a little more deeply. Others do really form the small business and become entrepreneurs and take their goods to the marketplace in one way or another. And then a lot of others end up becoming employed by, you know, employers that are in related fields, like the galleries, like other studio artists.
I'd love to know too. I was wondering, sort of a follow-up question there, Olivia. So you came from out of state. I don't know if that was before, you know, or if you came for the program, but I'd love to hear from you about what brought you specifically to Haywood.
So it's actually a kind of a funny story. I had moved to Asheville almost 10 years ago, and I was ready to leave pretty much immediately. And it was actually because all of my best friends who are my best, like all of my best friends now are my best friends since we've been in kindergarten, and all of them came down to Asheville to go to college at Warren Wilson. And so I followed everybody, and then I um my friend Megan, who I grew up with, was like, I think oh right, she had a loom and she taught me how to like throw the shuttle. And then she was like, there's this school. And so we went out to Haywood together. And I remember going to the library and seeing they had this like awesome section of textile books. And we set up a tour and walked around. And I was like, all right, this is it. And Haywood was what got me to stay in Asheville. It changed my whole, it changed everything for me. And then what's funny about it too is everybody I spoke to since then to this day, I'm like, you have to go to Haywood. It is the greatest experience of my life. If I could go 50 times over and over and over again, I would do it again. And Cricket, who is here right now, we met at a little market where I was selling my work. And Cricket was like, where did you learn how to do this? And I was like, Haywood Community College, you should go. And Cricket graduated a couple years ago also. So it's kind of like this like word of mouth whisper network is how I've found people got there, but I know it's actually a great question. How do other people find out about it?
It's always been that way. There was never a big advertising budget. There was never anything like that. It's just kind of always been that way. Mhm.
I guess also
But
Finland.
yeah,
People go to
maybe.
Finland and then they say,
Linda,
Yeah.
I came to Haywood as well. I met Amy teaching a double weave workshop, and when I found out that I could acquire her teaching services at Haywood, I moved states to move to North Carolina as well.
Great story. Thank you for sharing that. So, lots of word of mouth and a lot of local love for Haywood, it sounds like. Okay, we're getting quite a few questions in the chat, so I'm gonna start pulling questions from here. Is there a collaboration between Haywood and Black Mountain College, which is probably fairly close by?
Well, Haywood, Black Mountain College is no longer in operation, of course. So there's not a direct, collaboration happening. Now, the history of Black Mountain College is taught in our history courses, our contemporary history courses, particularly 20th century craft, and the impact on our fields and this region is shared with our students. And then we certainly field trip to the Black Mountain College Museum in Asheville, especially to the recent fiber exhibition that was held just last year,
Yeah.
I think. Catherine, did you ever have any connections with Black Mountain College during your tenure?
No, because it was gone. It was gone, and there were little remnants of the future of the Black Mountain College Museum that eventually happened in Asheville. No, because it was rather short-lived, and mhm. but it's another part of the heritage right here. I think the thing that impressed me so much about that weaving show that was at the museum last year was it was really about the people that taught it at Black Mountain, like Annie Albers, and then all of the people that she touched, and the people that they touched, and the people that they touched, and I actually sat down and did like a spreadsheet and found that I was affected for Black Mountain from two different directions. So it's kind of nice. Yeah, yeah.
Great. Thank you both for answering that. Amy, you've already talked a fair bit about how you're pivoting, this semester and thinking towards next semester. There's a question from Danielle about are there future endeavors or project on the horizon for the program? Anything else that you'd like to share about future projects?
I don't foresee anything quite like the blanket, what I'm calling the blanket project, our current studio-wide project. I don't foresee anything like that happening again in the foreseeable future. This is such an unusual circumstance. But all of my students, both first year and second year, plus an independent study graduate and myself, were all participating in the blanket project. What I foresee the future spring semester and going forward is getting back to normal, getting back to the full and regular syllabus, and getting these students graduated. Their final year culminates in a graduate exhibition, and that's always held at the Folk Art Center in Asheville. That's the headquarters of the Southern Highlands Craft Guild. So it's a spectacular opportunity, and the show is, of course, professionally curated and installed by guild staff. So that's an annual wonderful event that I would love everybody to know about. Every summer, Haywood graduates, their work can be seen at the Folk Art Center.
That's wonderful. I'm glad you mentioned that. Deborah's about to say something, I think.
How could you tell? Amy, about how many blankets are you expecting to produce in this project right now that you'll be auctioning off?
Certainly a minimum of 10. A minimum of 4, I'm going to say 14
Okay.
being produced to give away. Now, I do have 1 or 2 students who have already identified who and where they want to donate. So they'll be doing that personally. We are very much, I'm talking with my students regularly about how exactly we're going to handle this, making the donation, to whom and in what form. And it's very important that that we come to a consensus, that it's a group decision. And I've left it very open for any of them that if they identify their own personal direction to go with giving the blanket, then everyone's welcome to do that. Everyone has set up to make 2 blankets. So we will produce up to 24 or 23 blankets. Now, the second set is also optional for students to keep for themselves, or to sell, or to also donate. So that remains to be seen. We're actually in the stage of everyone has just started on their first blanket.
Okay. And you've got 12 students or 13 or something?
Yes, 12 students plus the graduate, and then plus myself.
So just thinking here,
Yeah.
If there was somebody who was not in North Carolina, but who wanted to weave for this project a blanket, would you be open to that?
Oh, I'd have to think about all the implications, how quite we would carry it out. But what I will say is that this overshot pattern double weave structure is fabulous. I am keen to share that with people. I mean, not that it's, it's not, I didn't invent it, of course, but I've just learned it myself, and it's great with this wool.
Well, think about that, because there may be people here who are thinking, well, I could weave a blanket and send it also.
Okay, maybe I'll work with Kelsey on that possibility.
Yeah, we can definitely help spread the word about any, the sale of the blankets that are being woven currently, any other possibilities for collaboration. And if anyone here is really anxious to support or help in any way, you can either write to me and I'll pass information to Amy, or we'll also, Amy, if you put your email in the chat, then everyone will have it. And I'll also send it out next week with the recording. So we'll make sure you have a good method of communication if anyone really is anxious to be involved. Fantastic. This is what WARP is all about. Okay, there are a couple more questions. There's Carol says that she's working on a project focused on the history of women's work in the home and textiles, and wants to know if there are any particular resources that any of the panelists would suggest that she makes sure not to miss. And if there's anyone on the call who wants to put a resource in the chat or chime in, I'm sure there are probably lots of ideas in the group, but we'll start with anything from the panelists about women's work or textiles in the home.
What comes to my mind, and I don't know if you're interested in ancient history, is Elizabeth Barber's book called Women's Work.
Mhm.
Is amazing book. How about you, Catherine? You think
And that's exactly what came to mind, and that's sort of the beginning of all of it. I mean, she makes that case right in the very beginning.
I guess also my question is, to Carol, are you looking primarily for like resources that are like domestic in the States, or resources that are like literary resources? Because if not, I would totally recommend reaching out to like probably any weaving collective that you find, especially in Guatemala, where they really changed what it looked like to work. Because especially like the place that I had gone to, it was taboo for women to work before the Civil War. And so after that, roles had changed and it developed sort of anew what it meant to be a woman who worked. And so that's an interesting thing if it's something you're interested in.
Yeah, I've been focused on the Hudson Valley, which is where I live, in particular around Sojourner Truth and the slave weaving, which I'm trying to find resources on. But you're talking about Guatemala. I've written that in my list now. This is a one-day event, which is mostly demonstrations with some info panels in it, and I feel like it could be a master's thesis at this point. So
I'm sure.
but I
Very
think activism and support for the industry side of things is really important. So
Yeah.
thank you.
Thank you all. And I would add one other resource, which is that on Warp's website, we have a listing of textile related publications that were written by Warp members. And so if you're on our website, there's a community tab at the top and then member publications under that. And I don't know that I don't know if there's a text that's specifically related, Carol, to your research, but there are quite a lot of publications there with some descriptions. And if you're a Warp member with a publication that is not currently listed, there's also a submission form on that page. So submit your publication and we'll make sure it gets listed. And Deborah's chomping at the bit.
Carol, we have two people coming to the Warp meeting in Tuscaloosa next year who are going to be talking, one has written a book about slave weaving, and two of them at least that I know of are interested in it and may have resources for you. So if you send me your email address or something, tell me your email address.
I'll get in touch with you.
Okay. All right.
Thank you. Thank you.
Sure.
And also, Margaret, the last thing in the chat, Margaret shared a link to a book you might be interested in checking out as well. Let's see, I saw one other question. And then we'll probably get close to wrapping it up. Amy, what colleges or businesses are you aware of for someone who wants to learn as a complete beginner in Southern California? And I do see that there is one response below that about California State Long Beach having a fine textile program. And the Southern California Handweavers Guild maintains a list of teachers in the area. So that's been a little bit of response, but does anyone have anything else to help with sending Sonia in the right direction?
I do not, and I noticed those responses in the chat to that question, and someone is pointing her in the right direction, so it's good.
Great. Okay. Well, I think we're getting close to time to wrap up. I want to thank the three of you for being here, for sharing about the history of Haywood, what's currently going on with Haywood. And I want to thank everyone who joined in for this program on this Thursday afternoon. I want to also just take a quick moment to share about our upcoming programs for Warp. So as I mentioned at the beginning, This is our last continuing textile traditions panel discussion of the year. We will resume with a program with Andean Textile Arts in January. So that program will be on Thursday, January 16th. Andean Textile Arts is a great WARP member organization, so that'll be a really fantastic program. And then we also, if you're a WARP member, we have our upcoming Meet a Member Fireside Chat. We do have that in December. So we'll be talking with WARP member Tina Jennings on Tuesday, December 10th, and learning about her and her work. And you can find all of our upcoming programs on the WARP website. So thank you again to everyone for joining today, and I hope you have a great rest of your week.
Good to see you all. Thanks.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.